A warm welcome from my side to today's webinar and discussion about how companies can optimize water benefits as part of their 1.5-degree aligned net zero roadmap. And the focus today will be on agricultural supply chains. My name is Alexandra Frank, and I'm a senior managing consultant in the agricultural value chains team at South Pole. Next slide, please. Up front, a few housekeeping rules. We'd like to make this very interactive. So on the one hand, there will be 2 polls. And then on the other hand, while you are all on mute now, your questions and comments are welcome at any time. And please submit them via the questions box in GoToWebinar. Towards the end of the session, we will take them up in the Q&A together with Carlo. And we're broadcasting from our homes, so in case there are any issues, please bear with us. And for you to know, this webinar will be recorded and it will be made available to you. Next slide, please. For those who don't know South Pole yet, we have a 15-year history of providing innovative sustainability solutions and advisory services across the whole value chain in areas such as carbon, water, biodiversity, energy, and plastics. And we also work towards scaling finance into these solutions through vehicles like Funso platforms. You'll find our experts across 22 offices around the globe, and our team consists of over 500 advisors, scientists, and engineers. And in addition to co-developing sustainability strategies, we as South Pole are always very close to the ground with the farmers in the field, in the landscapes, and driving and scaling action. So South Pole is the world's largest developer of climate action projects. And now I have the pleasure to introduce our speakers and experts of the day. We bring together 3 experts from organizations that are active in this field of climate mitigation efforts and increasing water resilience. Deepa Mago joins us from the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, and she focuses on business-led efforts in water security and water management, and is part of the Nature and Water team working on scaling positive agriculture. Deepa will kick us off with a short input around business resilience, and then she will be followed by Christina, who is our water and agricultural supply chain expert based in London. She focuses on corporate water action and conservation finance, and will briefly explain the approach that Nestlé and South Pole took in developing the net zero roadmap and maximizing water benefits. And we have Carlo, Technical Director in Water Resources at Nestlé, and he has been participating in the most relevant international water platforms, such as the Alliance for Water Stewardship. And we would also love to hear and understand from you who you are. So the first poll is coming, and we would love to understand, as you click your options in a few seconds, whether you work on water, on carbon, on both, or on something else. So that's water stewardship, lines for water stewardship, target setting, collective action, and in carbon, for instance, greenhouse gas accounting, science-based target setting, roadmap, and interventions within the value chains. All right, and if we could quickly see the, okay, so it's great to see that we have many of you already working in both water and carbon, with a slightly bigger share of people focusing on carbon only. Thank you. And with this, I would like to hand over to our first expert, Deepa Mago.
Thanks very much, Alexandra, for this opportunity for me to speak at this important dialogue and for this nice introduction that you just provided. So hello, everyone. I work with this organization called the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, and we'll just take a minute or so to introduce you to the organization and what it does. So WBCSD is actually a membership-led organization with about 200 global companies as our members that we work with around this common vision of creating a world in which 9 billion people are all living well and within planetary boundaries by 2050. We work with the C-suite representatives of our member organizations who lend their voice, but also their leadership in developing, some of the business-led solutions to the key sustainable development related challenges here with us at WBCSD. Can you move on to the next slide, please? There are 6 work programs across which WBCSD's work is structured, and these work programs are focused on 6 systems transformations or transformations that are required across value chains or systems. And therefore, this is the very basis of our work, that we indeed need transformations to happen across the value chains instead of those happening, as standalone pieces of improvement in particular parts of the value chain. We need to think of systems as a whole. The Food and Nature program is where I work, and I will share some of the insights that this program has actually developed through its work across the food and nature systems in working with some of our member companies. Next slide, please. Now, WBCSD did what was called the Vision 2050. It developed what was called the work around Vision 2050, trying to transform last year, which actually defines our strategy and provides a basis for our shared vision of 9 billion people living within the planetary boundaries, living well and within planetary boundaries by 2050. Now, as part of this work, we have identified 9 different transformation pathways that outline pathways where transformation is needed, and business action is clearly required to lead this transformation that the world needs. Now, this important piece of work actually recognizes that resilience, business resilience, is an important mind shift, a shift in mindset that is required by companies in order to drive this transition. And it says that companies must recognize that they are only as resilient as their systems are, which they are a part of. And companies need to have an enhanced capacity to anticipate, embrace, and adjust to the key, sort of systemic shocks. Including one, from COVID-19 that actually came about 2 years ago and has actually changed the way in which the world lives and the world thinks, about transformation. So very much business resilience is considered as an input to the long-term success of business, and it is very much considered as a mindset shift that the companies need to have in order to, actually deal with the transition that's coming. Next slide, please. Now, water and climate are connected, and they actually pose a significant risk for companies, including risks to their operations, to their financial health, to their reputation, and so on. One of the breakthroughs that happened in how climate-related risks actually affect the financial bottom line of the company happened when the TCFD recommendations for corporate disclosure were launched about 4 to 5 years ago, which actually helps companies understand how their financial bottom line gets impacted from climate change. Now, some of the sector-specific efforts have been led in this area of work to inform how sector-specific actions or specific sectors actually get impacted from climate change, or what are the opportunities for some of these sectors to actually work on as, to derive value from as the transition of the world towards net zero carbon happens. Now, one of these sector-specific efforts is the Food, Agriculture and Forest Products related TCFD Preparer Forum that WBCSD had led, which actually helped us work with some of our food and agriculture sector member companies to understand how exactly the climate-related risks impact food and agriculture and forest sector companies, and how can companies deal with those issues, or how can they grasp the opportunities that are related to this transition. Now, the Preparer Forum very clearly recognized the clear link between climate and water, and even developed, did sort of scenario analysis. So try to understand the water stress related implications for productivity, pricing, availability and quality, etc. from climate change, and also identified some of the opportunities that the food and agriculture sector companies can grasp. And transformative agriculture, regenerative agriculture, investment in nature-based solutions clearly have been identified as some of the solutions which the companies can adopt to help take advantage of the low carbon transition going forward. Next slide, please. Now, water as a risk is actually connected to other risks as well. And in particular, these connections are visible in the food and agriculture sector, where water is linked to land degradation, inefficient production practices, and so on. And our studies reveal that the aggregated impact from these cluster of risks or interconnected risks, the aggregated impact from such risks is much higher than the impact from individual risks. And this report that I'm showing here on the slide is actually from the work of work of 2020 that we did on dynamic risk assessment, which actually analyzed risk in a further advanced way compared to the traditional likelihood versus severity axis assessment that companies do. Now, on the dynamic risk assessment, it was revealed that water is very much a part of this cluster of risks, which together can have an impact which can be catastrophic. And so I would encourage you to look at this publication, which has further insights on risks impacting the food and agriculture sector. And some of these insights have actually helped companies integrate this knowledge into target setting and helping build solutions for their companies. Next slide, please. In fact, water and climate are not just the two risks that are connected, but they are also connected to certain other important variables in the system. I picked up this graphic from Nestlé's net zero roadmap because it clearly shows that there are several interconnections with a lot of other stakeholders that the companies need to be cognizant of. For example, their actions can have an impact on farmer livelihoods, excuse me, and also on the health of the consumers that they serve. And in this sense, companies should be aware of what are the interconnections of these different aspects within their value chains, and actually help build win-win solutions for different stakeholders. Excuse me. Also, some of the work that WBCSD has done on what is called the Water Impact Protocol. This is a protocol that actually helps companies adopt a standardized approach to assessing and valuing impacts that are related to their fresh water. From that work, we have actually learned that the value there is to some of the impacts, whether positive or negative, that are caused because of agricultural value chain actors is actually shared value. So when an agricultural producer, a typical farmer, does better water management, he reduces his costs, input costs for his farm, but also causes a positive impact on the financial bottom line of the company that is sourcing from that farmer, and also enhances the overall economic output from that area. Similarly, some of the trends around food prices globally can actually be traced to bad water management, or water management not done very well locally. So the value actually gets shared between different stakeholders, or the costs actually get shared between different stakeholders. It's the point that I'm trying to make here. And so it's very important for the companies to recognize that there's this value shared, it can actually cascade down the value chains. And so companies should be very intelligently doing analysis of what trade-offs are there as they define solutions for their value chains. Next slide, please. And finally, here are some of the lessons that we have learned. Sorry. Some of the lessons that we have learned from the work that we've done with our members on water and climate agenda. The first one is collaboration is key. So while businesses face all these risks around water and climate, they themselves cannot find all the solutions. And so they need to work collaboratively with their other stakeholders, including governments, including their consumers, including farmers that they work with anyway, but need to collaborate with them in order to develop solutions. And at the level of WBCSD, we are working together with our members, explore the partnership with the Water and Climate Coalition, which is actually a multi-stakeholder group that addresses this very link between water and climate, not just in terms of raising the profile of water in climate negotiations, but also helping address some of the gaps in this agenda, which can actually support companies take better decisions. The second is that companies highlight that data gaps are very evident. So finding localized data which is granular enough to make a meaningful input into their studies or models is not available every time. It's not available either in open access domain, or it is not granular enough to be making a meaningful input into their models. Also, another learning from our water impact protocol exercise is that watershed specific data and valuation or monetization factors, which actually help companies associate a value with the impacts that they cause, is actually lacking. And finally, the need for better models to inform companies more appropriately and precisely what their risks are or what kind of interventions they should adopt is also still needed. As I said, the more integrated approach we are able to take, or holistic approach we are able to take, the better. But also integrating data such as on-field capacity, soil moisture, water quality into climate models. So integrating data on the different aspects into climate models to make them more precise is also what really sort of needs to be done going forward in this area of work. So I'll stop here. Thank you all for your patience and for listening. And I'll hand over now to Christina Mellin from South Pole to take forward with this webinar.
Thank you very much, Deepa. I think these points, these key takeaways you highlight are really important, especially the data point. We do need more good data on water to move forward. What I'll run us through in the next few slides is how to optimize your net zero strategy if you would like to from a water perspective. And I'll specifically look at the example of Nestlé. So it's great that we have participants that work on carbon, on water, and both. We hope that this gives you a bit of an inspiration to move further and move these two topics even further together. So if we go to the next slide, our starting point is climate change. The three world maps on the slide show the temperature increase based on different IPCC scenarios. Growing conditions in agriculture as a result will change globally. Even if we achieve the objective of the Paris Agreement, and that's an if, combining this with the fact that on average 70% of water withdrawals are related to agriculture, we see a linkage here. Adaptation to climate change will have a strong water component. As we move, and at the moment, we see an increasing engagement from the corporate sector on climate change, which is fantastic. And what is especially to highlight here, we see a science-based targets approach. We see net zero strategies. And one example of that is Nestlé. If we now look at the next slide, you have a summary of Nestlé's net zero strategy. South Pole supported the development of this strategy, and that included a model to calculate the greenhouse gas mitigation potential for agricultural land that assesses various actions and their costs. There are a few points that I'd like to highlight, and you see them coming up on the slide as I speak. One is that regenerative agriculture will play an important role. The roadmap includes milestones for sourcing of key ingredients. You see it on the slide, 20% of key ingredients by 2025 and 50% by 2030. These milestones were key for us when we were working with Nestlé. Now Nestlé wanted to understand what the potential was for the net zero strategy to lead to benefits for water. Our approach to answer these questions needed to fit seamlessly in the work on the net zero strategy. Here, looking at agricultural practices, especially our regenerative agricultural practices, was our starting point. And as we go to the next slide, we see examples. As part of here, you see an overview of key actions. These include actions in livestock as well as crops, and they range from diversified crop rotation to organic fertilizer use or irrigation technology. Our initial screening based on the available scientific literature showed that many of these activities had a high potential for water co-benefits. Translating these results into actionable information for the development and implementation of the roadmap was our next step. And if we go to the next slide, I'll briefly talk us through our approach. Now, our analysis chiefly showed that benefits from these activities we saw fell overall in two categories. Those that had an impact directly on the field. These were generally also benefits that could be estimated or measured on field. And here it's important to note that being able to quantify these benefits at some point was very important for Nestlé. You see them here in the slides. They include reduced irrigation amount, increased soil water retention capacity, or reduced runoff. The second overall category were activities that clearly have a positive impact on water. An example is the restoration of a wetland, which can have positive effects on the local aquifer, on water quality locally. However, for these positive impacts, it's necessary to look at the specific benefits on a case-by-case level. Ultimately, with this approach, we were able to identify the potential water benefits of all the key actions included in the Net Zero roadmap through this framework. An example, if we go to the next slide, is organic fertilizer. Here we can see that switching to organic fertilizer comes with positive impact on water, as the soil water retention capacity increases and runoff can be reduced, given adequate timing is considered in the application of the fertilizer. At the same point, from a carbon perspective, we have carbon that is sequestered as organic carbon is built up, and emissions related to artificial fertilizer use are reduced. Now, having this information on water available allows Nestlé to enhance the net zero strategy from a water perspective. And we see that in what that means in practice on this slide. Nestlé now has a fully integrated approach for the net zero roadmap process and can look at options to enhance the net zero roadmap from a water perspective. This is especially key as the implementation of the roadmap is moving forward in the next phases, and you see that in the output table on the slides. Location-specific information on the planned activities will increasingly become available in addition to the benefits identified purely on the activities. At this stage, also considering geographic-based water risk information will contribute to further enhancement of the strategy, especially in areas that have already been identified as priorities. You can see on the bottom half an example of how this would look like. And the reason I'm highlighting that is that having all this information in one place, it was really key for decision makers to be able to take decisions that would support positive benefits on water while the net zero strategy is being implemented. Now, after this brief review of what we did, I'm coming a bit back to the key messages here, and that's leveraging synergies. We started with climate change and challenges we're facing in water. I think Deepa pointed out quite a few. That means we need to go to a scenario in which carbon and water mitigation and adaptation activities are done at the same time or being implemented at the same time. And it is clear that at times, as we showed in our approach, that can start with simply combining information for decision makers. And then as we move forward, and that was key, we build in docking points where, as we move forward, the strategy can also start looking at the quantitative outputs of these benefits. So this is where I am stopping my brief presentation of our approach that we looked at with Nestlé to enhance the water perspective in the net zero strategy. And I hand over again to Alexandra.
Thank you so much, Christina. And great to see that Carlo already switched on his camera. Prior to jumping into the dialogue with Carlo, discussing some of the recurring issues within water work, I would love to hear from you, also from the audience, if we pull up the poll again. What have been the key, or what has been the key challenge for you working on? If you would just pick the main challenge.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I am so sorry that I have to take the call from my car, which is a bit unusual. Bear with me. I'm not sure I understood completely the question, but I guess you were asking, was more an opening question on what are the main challenge in driving water into ESG strategies.
Yeah, exactly, Carlo. And I'm asking now also our audience, what have been the key challenges for them, for each and everyone working on water? And the options include internal silos, that there's such a high momentum in carbon, for instance, through science-based target setting, whether it's more related to modeling of water impacts and benefits, or monitoring and verification, engaging external stakeholders such as suppliers or users. And I'm sure there are many more. Maybe as okay, so there's a tendence for towards the high momentum in carbon, and also around where I think the would point towards engaging stakeholders, either the local water in the watersheds or the value chain actors. That's super great starting point. And interestingly, no one mentioned the internal silos. So in our work, what we see is that there are often several different environmental strategies, one for carbon, one for water. Carlo, I would love to understand from you what your entry point was as the technical director of water resources. Higher.
Yeah, it's an on and off again, Alexandra. So it's more for maybe the questions coming after with the audience. I may have a problem to understand, but I got enough to understand what was the question, and I saw what was displayed. Listen. I guess that most of us working in big companies or medium-sized companies, in any case, we face a great momentum in sustainability, in what we now call more and more ESG strategies. And personally, I'm very happy to see this ESG setup, because it's not only making our life easier in understanding what are in drafting altogether, what are the KPIs, what are the metrics, what are the targets. But ES, I mean, let's forget the G for the moment. ES means that help us all together to understand that there is always a chance, an opportunity, or also a duty to look into those specific sustainability streams from any standpoint, but also from an S standpoint, environmental and social. And to me, in all my life, managing water resources at different level in my company, I have really discovered that managing water was more than the technical dimension. More and more in the last decade, we have learned that while we were drafting the concept of water stewardship, we understood that it was really a must to look at the social component of managing water. So when now we look so clearly how to link the environmental components, technical components with the social component in what we're doing, this is fitting perfectly well with the way we have been moving from technical water management into water stewardship. For those who know more about the water space, you understand what I mean. I'm not sure if this is fully meaningful for you if you are coming from a pure carbon landscape. As you said, Alexandra, while companies are building strategies, they have different streams, and you may have the environmental streams like the climate change, the carbon, the packaging, the water stewardship, which is also very important. At least for us, has always been a natural priority at Nestlé. And then you have, the rest: human rights, biodiversity. So this concept of co-benefits is becoming very central in all what we are doing, because if we want to align these different streams in an ESG strategy, we need to more and more be focused on what are the positive overlappings, what are the co-benefits in what we are doing. And clearly, on my side, I can start mentioning that, and then we may see if you want to go into more detail, Alexandra. On one side, and Deepa mentioned that, especially we look at the carbon and water linkage, right? Especially today, we want to talk about the carbon and water linkage. So let's forget about the other streams for the moment. The carbon roadmap that you described quickly, Christina, is definitely showing how we're trying now to introduce water co-benefit in a strategy that was set up to achieve a greenhouse gas reduction down to 0 by 2050. And you already described that. So this is the way for us, for me especially, to bring in water co-benefits into a carbon strategy. There is, just to give you the other side of the coin, there is another opportunity we have at Nestlé currently. I don't know if some of you have seen our public commitment from our bottled water category, Nestlé Waters. We have a commitment to lead the regeneration of water cycles and delivering a positive water impact by 2025 in all our bottled water factories. That is clearly a very sophisticated, full-fledged water stewardship strategy. So we are talking about, let's say, mainly talking about delivering water stewardship initiatives to produce volumetric water benefits, somehow to create a positive water balance locally. But clearly, when we deploy water stewardship initiatives at the landscape or the catchment scale, there are options and opportunities to also account for the carbon co-benefits into a water stewardship strategy. And very clearly, if I have to mention one of these categories, the crossroad of carbon and water, this is the whole set of nature-based solutions. Because clearly, if we work to protect a local catchment and we go for reforestation, better land management, wetland restoration, this will definitely provide, as you mentioned before, a water benefit, but this is also providing a carbon benefit. I think the problem, maybe we can discuss later on, is to get to a methodology that is clearly telling us from a quantitative standpoint what is the benefit, because from a qualitative point of view, we understand it. Probably today, we all collectively, so it's not a problem of one company, of one organization, we all still struggling a bit to find the conversion factors and to understand, okay, if I do that on 1 hectare, what does it mean for water in terms of cubic meters? What does it mean for carbon? Probably for carbon, we are more evolved in this sense.
Yeah, Carlo, I thank you so much for not only highlighting how it's important to look at water from this systemic point of view, always including also the social dimension. And I really like that you mentioned that also from a water point of view, you take into account carbon benefits from the very beginning. And this is also what we see in our work. If programs are designed and not from the beginning with both perspectives or multiple perspectives in mind, the actual quantitative reduction or carbon reduction or volumetric benefit in terms of water is very, very limited. So it's great to see that already taken into account from the beginning. And I also liked where you were going. I think this would refer back to what our audience said, that one challenge is there is so much excitement around carbon right now. And I think you started to explain how the water strategy is built on several layers, and one of them being included into the carbon roadmap, and the other one really focusing on the water stewardship piece also within the direct operations, and then going into the wider watershed. Would you like to expand a little more on that? Just because that was one of the main challenges also raised by the audience, that how from your experience you can Can you hear me all right? Oh, yeah. So
okay, because I have the system that is muting me all the time. I don't know. Yeah, no, I understood. So can you hear me? Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. No, I think, as many of you in the poll highlighted, we have a great momentum for a carbon focus in our ESG strategies, and I think this is very good, because in any case, this journey towards 1.5 degrees, wherever we land, I think we need to lead the way and try to make the best we can to have a collective climate change mitigation strategy. Here, when we're talking about water, as I said, for us at Nestlé, this has been a natural priority for our company since we started more than 150 years ago, because we understand that this is really something cutting across our value chain, and if we do not have enough water for us, for suppliers, for our factories, and for consumers, that is not the case to have a sustainable business. But it's true that when we have now the launch of very compelling strategies, but also very expensive strategies, financial resources, they are not unlimited. So you need to try to find a way, when you're trying to push for a water stewardship strategy and you want to have it ambitious enough, try to see what can be the best alignment also with other strategies like the carbon map we have, where you mentioned that because it's a publicly disclosed figure, at least that was the projection. We have quite an amount of money that is being allocated for that. So we would like to see to what extent we can work on 2 items or possibly even 3 items when we have the chance to deliver one project, because you have these co-benefit opportunities. So the strategy today on water stewardship is built on 2 levels. One is and remain a very specific water stewardship strategy. Typically, you have the factory water use where we have targets, KPIs, and we continue to be working on the efficiency of our operations. We have what I mentioned, the Nestlé Waters regeneration or local water cycles is a very specific water stewardship target. We have Alliance for Water Stewardship certification in all of our bottled water factories, but also happening in many food factories. And on the other side now, for all the reasons I described, we also have what we called a second level of water stewardship strategies embedded in other streams. And typically we have the carbon, and the carbon is really the biggest umbrella, including a bit of everything, because it's talking about especially ingredients, because ingredients are the biggest part of the carbon footprint. But within the carbon roadmap, which also speaks about the nature-based solutions, we have regenerative agriculture, and you displayed the slide with the public commitments and the targets to source key ingredients, a certain percentage, a very important percentage by 2025 and 2030, then going to 2050. And this is where we have the chance to work on the water component within in this case, regenerative agriculture strategy.
Yeah, that's super interesting to note. Like, on the one hand, it's really also about optimizing scarce financial resources, and then on the other hand, how you explain those different layers of the water strategy. And I would love to dive a little more deeper into the regenerative agriculture part, just because agricultural supply chains, as we know, they offer both a challenge but also opportunities. On the one hand, with biggest impacts both in water and carbon, but also with a tremendous carbon sink and water adaptation potential. So could you explain us a little more what the strategy is within the regenerative agriculture and water overlap?
Yes, with pleasure. I don't have slides, so I will try to be conversational, and I hope what I'm saying is clear enough. I don't know to what extent we need to make the case for water in agriculture, but I think that pretty much everybody understands that if we have most of the big water catchments around the world in an imbalance between availability and supply, so we are using more water than what is naturally charged, this is very much related to, not caused by, because there is a beneficial notion, value in using water, but it's mainly linked to the water use in agriculture, because I always recall the publication of Ian Hoekstra when he was trying to calculate the water footprint of humanity. And when you look at the calculations, you end up understanding that the blue water footprint, which is the the water that is taken from surface or groundwater systems, not including the rain, only the water that is available on surface and groundwater systems, out of the total water footprint, blue water footprint of humanity, 95% is related to water use in agriculture. So if we all care about a water secure future for this world, I think it's inevitable that we try to solve the problem in water and agriculture. Otherwise, whatever else we are doing in other areas will not probably help. So water and agriculture. Now, we are not the only one organization starting to use this new terminology, regeneration. And the point is to start with, what do we mean with regeneration? What is more than status quo? Because I think you need to explain to people when you talk about regeneration. So overall, what we mean, and this is really the big promise for us at Nestlé, we're talking about leading the regenerating food systems. So it's much more than regenerative agriculture. There, I think that the key terms are protect, restore, and renew. Okay, then what can be the meaning of water in regen ag? To me, it's coming back again to this notion of being a good water steward, because you protect, you restore, and you renew. Maybe renew is also going into the direction of ultimately challenging yourself against your footprint, your water footprint, and try to start working in certain places and targeting a positive water impact, as we are trying to do now with Nestlé Waters. But definitely, what I can say, how we are currently building this water strategy in RegenAg is on two levels. Again, it's all in two levels today, sorry. But the first level is what I call foundational. Foundational means we have good water management practices, guidelines. We normally use them in all of our supply chain, especially with the farmers who are connected with us in what we call Farmer Connect. And I think this is where we will continue to work and to strengthen our approach to make sure that everywhere we can, water is used in an efficient way. Efficiency, I think, as an analog with what we do with the factories, efficiency is helping because you reduce the water use for your needs, so you become less dependent, volumetrically speaking. But that does not mean at all that you will become resilient. And in fact, if we want to target resiliency, it means that we need to, in agriculture, but it's the same for our operations, we need to look beyond the piece of land where we can deliver efficiency, which for agriculture supply chain is the farm plot, but for operations is our factory. And we have to look at the catchment level. Water stewardship is catchment, watershed, very much similar to landscape when you're talking about nature. But in water space, we talk about catchment, because this is the unit area within which we are not only using water, but other people use water, and we are all facing the same risks and also have the same opportunities to collectively manage in a proper way water resources. So if you want to move to resilience, you need to target the catchment, and this is the only way to work with stakeholders in order to have a positive catchment balance. And in that case, yes, probably you can target having long-term sustainable access to water for your farm operations and also for the communities living in the areas. Otherwise, if you are efficient, you can put in place the most sophisticated solutions, but you will not have water on long terms if you don't understand who else is using water and how these other stakeholders use water. So two levels: foundational on one side, and the other one is more innovative. When you look at the catchment, we look at the positive water impact if you want to target. But catchment to me is a very important linkage between the foundational and innovative pillar, because targeting catchments means that you target understanding better the local water cycle. You don't look at it in your 200 hectares, you look at the whole size, and so you need to build studies, you need to understand what are the issues, and then once you know, you can put in place the right actions. It's impossible to have a plan if you don't know what is the risk.
From a very local perspective, absolutely. And I think this also, what you just mentioned, points a little bit to the question of how Nestlé engages with external stakeholders. So on the one hand, through the gap, more with an efficiency focus with the farmers, but I liked that you made the difference there between, efficiency versus resilience, and then with external stakeholders within the watershed, taken from a very local perspective, which is key when we speak about water, right? It's the main difference between carbon, where it doesn't matter where in the world you kind of reduce a ton of CO2, versus water, it really matters what the local context is, also to go beyond efficiency. And I have a million more questions. I would love to ask Christina if a question from the audience that you could answer.
Yeah, there are a few, and I think, Carlo, they go to a topic you already briefly talked about, and that is working together with internal influences. So I'm reading out here a question: how do I influence internal stakeholders? How do key water stakeholders and more general sustainability managers work together?
Yeah, I can give you some thoughts in random order. I think the opportunity we have nowadays with this new setup of ESG strategies and governance related to ESG within the companies give us the chance to remove silos. For example, in our case now that we have a very strong ESG governance internally, we try to speak about water to those people who were not necessarily my key internal stakeholders and before this organization, this new organization was structured, because I would have the tendency, with the pro and cons, to talk to water experts in the markets, to water experts at the center, but not necessarily to talk to my colleagues in the carbon roadmap. Yes, historically we have talked to and we have worked with colleagues from agriculture in our organization, but I think the opportunity is to work as we mentioned before, trying to factually understand what are the co-benefits in the strategies, because then if you start putting the water component, for example, in the carbon strategy as we did, it's something that gives you the chance to have a permanent pipeline for discussion. So let's say if today, colleagues from the carbon roadmap, from a carbon roadmap angles, they are trying now to, and this is what we are doing today, finalizing the list of key markets and key projects where we need to deploy carbon reduction for the next 2-3 years. What we did with you, South Pole, it was a very simple exercise, but we have tried to look into the tools that were used for our colleagues from carbon to engage with key suppliers, and then to be used with zones and markets to implement the strategy. We have simply introduced in spreadsheets columns related to water benefits. We have helped them to understand that there is a co-benefit. We have helped them to understand from a qualitative standpoint that yes, there is a benefit or no for that specific project. And so they start to understand. And now we will be in the position to probably select the key projects, because again, is a 80-20 rule. I mean, we want to start looking at the projects potentially delivering the biggest benefits and spend our time there, and not to be lost in thousands of projects. But we will start working with key suppliers identified for those projects and start understanding what can be the right way to go from a quality to a quantity type of accounting. So this is something we are doing today from a water perspective that was not normally the way to operate before. So entering into the carbon roadmap and speaking as a subject matter expert in water, it's something that happens more and more today, because we see the opportunity and the need to have this linkage and to have this overlapping in using resources. And when I talk about resources, it's not only optimizing financial resources, it's also optimizing human resources, because you may have, probably is the case also in other companies, you may have different teams at the center, but at the end you may land in the zone or in the market speaking to the same people, and the same people, they need to talk about water with me, they need to talk about carbon with someone else, they talk about agriculture with someone else. So it's a very good image as well. It's not only more time effective, but it's also a better image from the center to give an aligned strategies. Like you have a recipe with different ingredients, but you don't come with 3 different ingredients and you let them to make the cake. You want to give them the real understanding that is a combined, aligned approach.
Thanks, Carlo. I think it was super practical what you just mentioned, like really integrating this into spreadsheets, and being aware that also the people you talk to, the main suppliers, it's also about saving human resources on their sides, right? By having basically a joint approach. Would we have time for one more question and then we wrap it up? Christina?
Sure, and I think that's a question I think more for the external stakeholder engagement. From all of the co-benefits you've worked on with water, what has been the most charismatic? What has excited stakeholders the most, as well as having a big planetary impact?
Sorry, I'm not sure I understood the question. Could you please repeat it?
So the question is here, as you engage with external stakeholders on water, what has been most exciting for them? What are people looking for when they speak with you about water? Are they interested in reduction? Is it, where is the entry point in a conversation?
Yeah, you know, you may have a wide range of stakeholders. So it depends if you have financial stakeholders like investors, you have NGOs or civil society representative, or you have people from academia in the water space. Probably you would have different type of answers. I think what I can see is more and more people try to link the environmental and the social component for sure. So what people would sooner or later be interested in is, for example, to what extent we embed the human right to water into what we're doing. I didn't speak that much today, but clearly when I'm talking, for example, about Alliance Water Stewardship and the way we implement it, and maybe the plan to have the principles and the criteria also now embedded in the Regenerative strategy. For those who know Alliance Water Stewardship, we have basically 5 outcomes out of the strategy to become a water steward, and it's not only quantity, quality, status. It's about biodiversity, it's about governance, but it's also about access to water and sanitation. So this is something that people would love. Maybe just to close in 1 minute, this whole idea of what is water in Regenerative, I think everybody is still struggling a bit. So I gave you my own perspective, and we organized in this August in World Water Week a workshop with selected stakeholders in the water space, because we wanted to brainstorm a bit on the meaning of water in Regenerative. I quickly presented what I mentioned to you about our strategy. I think the takeaway, what I retained out of the inputs is that, and maybe it's interesting also for the audience, is that again, clearly everybody understands that this notion of working with others at the catchment level is needed. You cannot stick to the farm plot for sure. Something very important was also that because we also speak about numerical volumetric targets, people would not necessarily understand completely what is the meaning of a numerical target if it's a global one and it's not linked to something that they would size, because it can be big, it can be small, no one understands how many cubic meters means. Different is when you look at the local context, you look at local issues, and you may want to give a numerical target related to the issue you want to solve. Then it's becoming more understandable, then it's becoming more appreciated by the stakeholders we discuss with.
Thank you so much, Carlo. And to all the speakers, I think it was super interesting. And one key message for me, it's very timely to start acting on water now. And Carlo and Deepa both mentioned the several different dimensions beyond emission reduction and water benefits, or also going into human rights, going into WASH, and what Carlo also mentioned now towards the end, that how important it is to value what that benefit means from a local perspective. And obviously there are many challenges still around that in terms of valuation and modeling and so on, and stakeholder engagement. But this webinar today was about advancing the dialogue with these remaining open questions and finding some pragmatic solutions today. So thanks so much for joining, and I wish you all a very good rest of the afternoon.